What is up, guys? It is Quinn here, back with another video, and today I'm going to be going through my top 24 rookie rankings. It's going to be, every position here, super flex, so quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, just my top 24, and then also splitting them up into different tiers so you can kind of see what players, are close together in my rankings. I think in a previous video, I had mentioned that I was going to be talking about this free agency class, and honestly, I was planning on doing a video like after day one, after day two, but just the way like the free agents have kind of been signing, it started off really slow. So after day one, we barely had any fantasy relevant guys. Now, things have definitely started to pick up, but I feel like there are still, some bigger signings up in the air. Like right now, when I'm recording this, we still have Aaron Rodgers. We think he's going to the Jets, but we're just not positive. So I think for free agents, I'm actually just going to do like a big video, once most of the big names have signed or been traded, and then just kind of talk about the takeaways from there. But this specific video, looking at my top 24 Dynasty rookie rankings, remember this is going to be super flex, and this is for fantasy. This is not like my, overall real life NFL rankings. This is for Dynasty fantasy football, my rookie rankings, and let's just jump right into it. So tier one, I have one player in tier one, and it is Bijan Robinson from Texas. Right now in Keep Trade Cut, he's viewed as like a back end first round startup pick. So just the value from him to really any of the guys in tier two is pretty extreme. He's going to step in and likely be viewed as the RB1, at worst, like RB2, RB3 in the NFL. He's going to go in the first round, so I have no reason to move Bijan Robinson off of my number one spot. Now, moving into tier two, I basically just have three of the quarterbacks at like number 2, 3, and 4 in my rankings. So I've got Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, and Anthony Richardson. To be totally honest, I feel like a decent argument could be made for any of these guys to be the quarterback one. Bryce Young, he's kind of been the front runner, all season long, and, even heading into the offseason. With CJ Stroud, we have him now likely going to be the first round pick, or the first pick overall. He's the betting favorite. And then, Anthony Richardson just has an absurd ceiling. I do think, as we get closer to draft day, if we're very confident that Anthony Richardson is going to be like a top 5 pick, goes number 3, number 4, even number 5, I feel like I kind of have to put him as my QB1 in this class just because the upside is so absolutely wild. All he really needs to do is step on the field and showcase his legs, and his value is still going to grow. So this is how I have it right now, but like I said, Richardson could move up, Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, whichever guy you like there more. I'm not going to push too hard against it. And then the final player in tier 2 here is going to be Jackson Smith-Njigba. So the only non-quarterback in this tier. For me, he is my clear-cut wide receiver 1 in this class. I think he's also separated himself from the other tier 3 guys. So I do like him here up in tier 2 and my 5th overall player. Now moving into tier 3, I'm going to start it off with Will Levis from Kentucky. Now, I know he's not a super, overly popular prospect. I think of all the top quarterbacks, maybe him and Richardson, they are the guys who have like the most haters. But in Superflex, with how valuable the quarterback position is, if we have a quarterback who's likely going to be picked top 10, that guy really can't fall later than like a mid first round pick in rookie drafts. He has all the physical tools. He just has to put it all together. Now, is this like a guarantee he's going to put it all together? No. But if he, has those talents, he's able to translate to the NFL. And now we're looking at him as like a, top 30 dynasty asset. So I think the value's there on Will Levis. I totally understand if you're out on the prospect and want to trade out of the spot or maybe take one of these guys after. But for me, with the positional value, I'm going to have him here leading off in tier 3. Behind him, I have Quentin Johnston out of TCU. He is my wide receiver 2 in this class. As we all know, the dude is super physically talented, still a little raw in terms of his overall skill, his well-roundedness, but this is a guy where you're taking a swing on someone with a crazy ceiling. Right now, he looks locked into the first round. It kind of seems like it's going to be between Johnston and JSN to be the first wide receiver off the board, so I think this is a good spot for him, kind of in the second spot in tier 3. Now, also in tier 3, I have Jahmyr Gibbs out of Alabama. I really think, people are probably going to be going back and forth on like Levis, Johnston, Gibbs, obviously 3 different positions. There's going to be different confidence in these guys. That's why they're all in the same tier. I really like all of them, in terms of their value. So you could be flipping these guys around. For me with Gibbs, he is a little bit tough to rank just because he has the skill set of some of these elite fantasy running backs, right? When we're looking at some of the more undersized guys, the Ecklers, the McCaffreys, like Jahmyr Gibbs kind of has that skill set, but it's also tough to project a guy who is undersized to kind of just come in and be this like elite high level RB1. I think he's just going to need a landing spot where they're going to give him 14, 15, 16 opportunities a game, get him super involved as a pass catcher, and that's really where he's, kind of going to make his value in fantasy football. Like I said, he came in undersized, 5'9", sub 200, and I mean, he came in at 199, and that's probably with him chugging water the night before, so he may even be a little bit smaller than that. But we know he's a great athlete, ran a 4.36 40. Like I said, fantastic pass catcher, and I actually think he is pretty underrated as a runner. Even between the tackles, it's just a question of whether or not he's going to have the opportunity to do that at the next level. And then actually right behind him, I'm sticking at the running back position, and that's where I have Zach Charbonnet out of UCLA. I think there's a pretty decent fall off at the running back position after Charbonnet. I think we have Gibbs and Charbonnet kind of locked into probably round 2. And then after that, I feel like a lot of those other running backs are going to be going round 3, round 4, getting into day 3 picks. Maybe one of those other guys kind of sneaks into round 2, but I just don't have a great read on what guy that would be at this point. For Charbonnet, he is a super well-rounded profile. He has the workhorse size. He put together back-to-back monster seasons at UCLA. He's a guy who caught passes, 61 receptions in the past 2 seasons. And like I said, he'll have the draft capital. So definitely a very well-rounded profile for Mr. Zach Charbonnet. And then rounding out tier 3, this was a guy that I kind of had a tough time deciding between tier 3, like bottom of tier 3, and then top of tier 4. I ended up putting Jordan Addison at the very end of tier 3. Like I said, I think he's stuck between those. If you think he's a tier 4 guy, I'm cool with it. I do think he's well below Quentin Johnston in terms of, being a rookie pick, but I also do think he's just a little bit better off than some of those tier 4 wide receivers. He's a guy who's definitely had his draft capital hurt by his combine performance. Definitely didn't test well. Came in pretty small, was not the athlete you would want for someone, with that kind of smaller stature. But I don't think we can just completely, throw away his fantastic college production because he came in, not super athletic. Maybe he doesn't have that crazy ceiling. Maybe he's not going to be a consistent top 10 wide receiver for fantasy, but I think he's a guy who can give you a lot of really solid, wide receiver 2 seasons, a guy who's a mid-tier wide receiver 2 year after year. So that's where I have Jordan Addison right now. And then just looking into tier 4, I just have 3 wide receivers here. It's guys who are super close together in my rankings: Zay Flowers, Josh Downs, and Jalen Hyatt. These guys all kind of bring different things to the table. I'm sure some people are very high on Jalen Hyatt after his crazy junior season. We had Josh Downs, who's kind of carried by a massive sophomore season. And then Zay Flowers has the production, from a non-powerhouse school. Now shifting into tier 5, I'm going to be starting it off with back-to-back tight ends. So starting off this tier, it's going to be Dalton Kincaid, and then right behind him, I have Michael Mayer. I think in general, this is just going to be a very, very strong tight end class, both for fantasy and for real-life NFL. I'm pretty sure I'm going to be in the minority here, having Kincaid as my tight end 1. I think a lot of people are going to go with Mayer, or maybe even a guy like Darnell Washington. But for me right now, Dalton Kincaid will be my tight end 1. I still think Mayer's probably going to be the first tight end off the board. And I think in general, as a real-life NFL tight end, I think Michael Mayer is definitely the more well-rounded option. But when we're looking at ceiling for fantasy football, right, for fantasy, the tight end 8, 9, 10, no one cares about those guys. The difference from a mid-tier tight end 1 to a mid-tier tight end 2 is basically nothing. We want to shoot for the upside. We want those tight ends that are going to be going, 13, 14, 15 plus points per game. And when we're looking at ceiling, I think Dalton Kincaid has, the most potential in this class to be an elite high-end tight end 1. He's a better athlete. He's coming off a super impressive 890-yard, 8-touchdown season. And, maybe he'll test somewhat poorly at his pro day. For me right now, if he, lives up to what I'm expecting from him out of that pro day testing, I'm going to keep him here, as my tight end 1 in this class. For Mayer, I think, he's going to be a first-round pick, and I do expect him in his NFL career to be a solid top 12 fantasy tight end. I just don't know if he has that same ceiling of a guy like Dalton Kincaid, just because he's not going to test as an elite athlete. Now, sticking around in tier 5, this is just going to be a huge chunk of running backs that I have in a similar tier. So we're going to have A-Chain, Tajay Spears, Roschon Johnson, and Sean Tucker. We're going to have them in that order. If you're flipping these guys around, I'm not super concerned. This is a variety of different player types here. You've got some of the smaller backs. You have some of, the bigger guys, some 3-down backs, some guys who, may just need a few touches, like an A-Chain. I think they all have their own concerns and their own positives. And for all 4 of these guys, I feel like the draft capital is pretty up in the air. I'm pretty sure all these guys are going to be going round 3, round 4, but maybe one of them sneaks into round 2, maybe one of them surprisingly falls later on, and then if that happens, we will reevaluate from there. Now, shifting into tier 6, just like tier 5, we're going to start off tier 6 with a tight end, and this is where I have Darnell Washington out of Georgia, starting off my tier 6. He's honestly a guy that I do kind of struggle to rank because he has some clear positives. I mean, with the size, he is pretty much a freak athlete. It does seem like his ceiling is pretty high at the tight end position, but then we have, a lack of college production, and then he's an absurd blocker, but does that potentially hurt him, take him off in terms of not running as many routes as some of the other top, tight ends we're going to see out there? We do have history with a guy like Kittle, who didn't really produce super well in college, but he had the athleticism and, obviously is having a great NFL career. But are we trying to bet on an outlier like George Kittle? For me, I'm not sure. I'd be willing to take him as like mid to back end second round, but right now I think any earlier, I'm not going to be spending an early second round pick on Washington at this point. I understand you can kind of excuse away the lack of production just because he was playing behind Brock Bowers, who obviously is probably going to be the tight end one next season. But for me, I think we just have to kind of weigh the clear pros and then also the clear concerns with Darnell Washington. Now we're going to have some wide receivers here in tier 6. The first one here is going to be Marvin Mims out of Oklahoma. He tested super well. Oklahoma's wide receiver 1 in all 3 of his seasons there. And for Mims, we're really just hoping for round 2 draft capital. If I had to guess, I think he's probably going to be picked mid to late second round, which I think would be very solid for fantasy. And then behind him, we have Xavier Hutchinson out of Iowa State. I think, once again, I'm probably higher on him than consensus. Super productive in college, isn't going to test crazy well, didn't do anything wild at the combine, is probably underwhelming if you didn't really know his play style heading into it. I think in terms of PPR scoring, I think he could be a really strong weapon that could come in and make an impact from day one if he does have the right landing spot. The only problem here with Hutchinson is with some of these other wide receivers that I'm not as high on, they could end up going like round 2, round 3, whereas I don't think it would be a complete shocker if Hutchinson falls to day 3. But if you're going day 3, the likelihood of you hitting is definitely not great. So we're hoping for day 2 there with Hutchinson. And then we have Hendon Hooker here out of Tennessee. If you just looked at this dude's college numbers, you would probably think he'd be lined up to be like a top 10 pick in this draft. This past season, he threw for 3,135 yards, 27 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, and completed almost 70% of his passes. And that was in a season where he didn't even get to complete it because, he tore his ACL. Also has some rushing upside, rushed for over 1,000 yards on the ground over the past 2 seasons. Like I mentioned, he is coming off the ACL, so there's a concern there. He probably won't be ready to play in 2023 because if you're a rookie, and you're not getting those reps before the season, it's tough to see, a team throwing him into the starting role if he's getting healthy, mid 2023. And then he also is already a very old prospect at 25 years old. And then he's coming from a college system that really doesn't translate well to the NFL. But I still think, the quarterback position, the value we place on it, I think he'll probably go in the second round of the NFL draft. I think he's worth a shot in like the late second, early third round of fantasy rookie drafts. And then to wrap up tier 6 here, honestly, I feel like we could have gone with a bunch of different players here. I ended up going with Tank Bigsby to wrap up tier 6. We could have seen some other running backs, Miller, Abanikanda, Evans, Brown, all these guys could be in the mix, maybe even another one of these super athletic tight ends. The problem with Bigsby here, he just never took that massive jump from his freshman season. Everything wasn't great around him, throughout his career. I think he's probably going to be around 3-4 pick. I think someone who's a decently well-rounded back. I just don't know exactly what that role is going to be, in the NFL level. But that is going to wrap it up for my top 24 rookie rankings and my tiers. Let me know what you guys think down below in the comment section. Like I said, I will try to get into the free agents, once we kind of have almost everything kind of decided. Hopefully that Rodgers deal gets done soon. Maybe a few more of these wide receivers signed, some of the top running backs that are available, and then I'll be able to go over, a complete overview. But that is going to wrap it up for this one. Thank you all for stopping by, and I will see you in the next one.